The State of CSS is an annual survey that's been going on for a few years now that looks at the knowledge of and usage of different CSS features, as well as the use of and satisfaction of technologies like post-CSS, Sass, LESS, CSS-in-JS solutions, and much more than that. The results for the survey have just landed and I'm really excited to jump in and explore them. So let's go and check out and see what this current state of CSS is. All right, so here we are on the page, and I'll put the link to it just down below. And what I'm going to do is actually a refresh here, because check out this little loading animation when we get here. It's just super sweet. I just like that a lot. And before we dive into it, I just do want to say that you can actually get a lot more of their information as well through their API, or you can download the data directly. So if you want to analyze this in any other way, they've opened all of that up, including like if I jump through and we jump into this first one, there's different breakdowns where you can see like the breakdowns by chart, but when you go to that chart breakdown, you can also get the JSON data or the a GraphQL query. So if you want to play with these numbers in any way, they've made that available, which is just really, really cool of them. And I had to go back because I wanted to see that animation again. But yeah, we're going to be jumping into the survey. I'll be going through the results, but also giving you my feelings on any of the results, things that stand out to me, things that I find interesting, things that maybe disappoint me a little bit. So let's jump in and see what the current state of CSS is. So let's go to the next one, which is the t-shirt, which I'm wearing last year's t-shirt. So we'll probably be getting this year's t-shirt too, because it looks pretty great. Let's start off here though with the demographics, and I might skip through a few things here quickly. I might go through some of them a little bit slower and explore them in a bit more detail. The ones I'm really interested in are the features, technologies, environments, things like this, but there's also some accessibility questions and other stuff that came up this year. So I think we'll go through pretty quickly on the demographics, but let's see what we have here. So it looks like most people were in the States, which I guess is no surprise. Only 70% of people answered that one, but most people in the States, quite a lot in Russia. And I do think it is important to know who's answering it, because this can influence the results, the general results that we're getting as well, because there might be some countries in here that didn't have a lot of respondents, but it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of them that are actually actively using CSS. Most people were speaking English, or we have the age breakdown, and then we get the years of experience here that goes up over time. And ooh, look at that. So we have some breakdowns now actually, and this is kind of interesting. So I'm going to do by salary and see what we have there. And as you'd sort of expect, the salary goes up with the longer you've been working in the industry, the more money you make, which is not surprising. That's generally how it works everywhere. And yeah, so basically anyone who was making over 200,000 a year was either a few people at 2 to 5 years experience. Congratulations to you guys. But most of them were with quite a lot of experience, as you might expect there. And so let's keep going here. This company size, this surprises me a little bit, but it's a nice, pretty even breakdown with most people working at companies of 100 to 1,000 people. And I guess quite a handful of freelancers going on there at the other end of the spectrum. And a lot of people at really big companies as well who took the time to answer this. If we keep going, higher education, degree, all respondents, and by gender. Ooh, by gender, I'm curious what the difference will be there actually. But one thing I find here is I actually fit into this one. Yes, but in an unrelated field. But if you look at like the overall breakdown, and again, this is of total, but we're only adding up to 75. So let's go percent of question respondents, just so we actually get to 100. And it's basically half the people have a higher education degree in computer science or something front-endy related, I guess, since it's a CSS survey. And then the other 50% either don't have a degree or they have one in something that is not related. So it just goes to show that the self-taught versus for the higher education, it's a pretty even split in the end. That's kind of interesting. But here by gender, I'm very curious by. And so really interesting that women in general actually have more, and actually this doesn't really surprise me as that much, I guess, where a lot of them didn't study necessarily, say, computer science, but then through whatever reason ended up going into that. So there's quite a lot more in that unrelated field. Kind of interesting though. And again, the response, we do have a lot more men than women answering it, so that might skew things slightly as well, but I don't think so. So yearly salary, but in US dollars, and 50 to 100K is the one. But here we do get some breakdowns by degree, by experience, but by country is, I think, an important one to look at, because obviously salary and living expenses and cost of living are also really highly linked. So as you'd sort of guess, we have the Silicon Valley, crowd pushing the salaries way up, where a lot of people in the States are in that 100 to 200K group. And I wouldn't be, you're dealing with the large tech companies, so that does make sense. And the cost of living, if you're in San Francisco, even though you're making that much, so much of it might be going to living. Now, we're talking a lot more about remote work and other things as well, which obviously if you're remote work somewhere where cost of living is low and you're making that salary, that's amazing. But I do think it's an important thing that you have to look at is not just the raw number, but how much does it cost to live there? By degree, related field, I'm just curious here how it compares. It looks like people, actually this is kind of interesting, people that don't have any degree at all, looks like it's slightly lower on the pay scale, especially here in the I work for free. So I guess you're just learning, and that's students, so that of course they answered no there, which makes sense, but just the overall salary does seem to be skew a little bit higher for people that have a degree, whether that degree is in a related field or not. So that is kind of interesting there. And by experience, I think we sort of saw something that looked a little bit like that before. And yeah, under 1 year, a lot of I work for frees because they're still working. They're still learning, I should say. Source, I think this is how they found that. So we'll skip through that one. Gender, mostly men, as we saw already. Not too surprising that it's mostly men. Race and ethnicity. Yeah, that makes sense. By experience, actually, I'm kind of curious here, because here it is what it is. We're at white males, basically, is the industry, sadly, but it looks like we might be getting slightly more diverse. So, but let's go and look at by experience, because I am just curious, and it looks like 20 years experience is basically mostly white men. And then it does look like over time, we're actually trending toward a more diverse group, and hopefully that holds true as this keeps going. So like slowly, as the people here start getting more experience, they're not leaving the industry, but instead they're just falling into these more experienced ones. But yeah, I see this as a hopeful that we're getting into a more diverse. I see this as hopefully things are becoming more diverse as time goes on. Let's cross our fingers and hope that's what this is indicating. And disability status, we do have most people, percent of respondents, just because it's really skewed. Most people, it looks like not many people actually answered that one. So it looks like 30% completion. So not listed, I don't know if it means some people might have chosen that even if they just meant they don't have a disability. Whereas, I don't know if 30% of people were saying I have one, or if there was some misunderstanding with, but even if you do take that into account, say you dropped this by 10% less people or whatever, and you only had 20% of respondents that were listing a disability, that's still quite a lot of people replying that they had disabilities. Oh, there we go, ADHD, autism. Oh, so they listed. So if they chose not listed, then they were listing it out here, though only 41 people did that. But yeah, even if we drop these numbers down quite a bit to, even if it's 1,000 people out of the total amount that answered the survey, it just shows why accessibility and taking accessibility into account is so important, because it can still be easily 10, 20, 30% of the people that are going to be visiting your sites might have some form of disability or not. So taking into account all of that is interesting. And there are questions related to accessibility this year, which were new. So I'm looking forward to that. But now we're into the demographics, not the demographics, the features. And we're going to start, I guess, let's see. We have layout, shapes and graphics, interactions, typography, accessibility, and other features. So the way this works is the size grouped. Let's do by awareness and then by usage. Okay, well, I like these animations. That's fun. So basically the size of the dark circle is how many people are using it, and the size of the transparent circle is how many people are aware of it but haven't actually used it. So for all these people who say they know grid, because you can see there's actually more people saying it's probably tied, right? Know about 877, 876. And okay, whoever that one person is that knows about grid and not Flexbox, I'm guessing you made a mistake when you filled out the survey. But for anyone who is in this group where you've heard about grid, but you haven't used grid yet, get on that grid train. Come on. We're almost 2022 now. It's time to get into it. But by awareness, so see aspect ratio. So even here, like this is actually really interesting because I'm looking at like a few of these lower down ones actually have pretty high usage. Whereas like CSS, the container, which makes sense, isn't, a lot of people actually know about it, but the usage is super small basically because we can't really use it yet. But a lot of people are aware. So once container queries happen, it means like, or subgrid here, a lot of people have heard about subgrid, but they haven't used it yet. So once these things start becoming available to us, I have a feeling they're just going to explode and be everywhere very quickly. Whereas obviously these things down here at the bottom, like scroll timeline. Oh my goodness, people, you need to get on scroll timeline. It's absolutely, it's CSS scroll-based animations with CSS only. It's really, really awesome. Really, really cool. So yeah, this is, I think once this gets adopted by browsers, actually, and it might be a little while, but once it is, I think the know about it and have used it are going to skyrocket once that happens. But yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense there. Let's go by usage instead of by awareness, just to see if there's anything that stands out. Flexbox gap, actually, I'm sort of surprised that if you know about it, why you're not using it, even if it's not all the time, because you're still worried about Internet Explorer or something. I mean, a lot of these middle ones, it doesn't surprise me that there's pretty high awareness, but not as much usage, just because even like scroll snap, you're getting into more, like it won't come up on everything you're doing. It just, you'll find something maybe in a specific situation or perspective. If you're not doing much 3D work, you'll know about it, but you're not necessarily using it. So things like that make sense to me. Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I'm not surprised. There's nothing here that really jumps out at me and I'm like, holy moly, people need to get on this more. There's a few of these next year. I'm very curious to see how things trend a little bit. And then this is just out of everything listed. How many did you know about? So most people were sort of in that 40 to 80% group, which makes sense. Let's go check out CSS Grid. Oh, okay, so this is cool. Here's those trends I was talking about. We can see the trend year after year. So Grid, more and more people are using it. Very nice to see that. Subgrid, some people are getting on that. Hopefully, we're going to see Chrome is hopefully going to be dropping it very soon-ish. 2022, I'm guaranteeing it's going to land in Chrome. Then we just have to wait for Safari before it really explodes. But yeah, that's cool. Flexbox, I think that, you know, pretty much, I think the people who haven't used it yet are just people who are new to CSS. Multi-column is, yeah, I mean, multi-column is really cool, but it's not useful in every case. And maybe some people don't even know, like you see multi-column, you might not be sure, but multi-column is just like columns 3 or something like that. But yeah, that's really cool. Writing modes, this really did like left to right, right to left, and different scripts and everything. It doesn't surprise me that people, it looks like have used and knowledge are growing on it, which is good. But it doesn't surprise me too much that it's slowly growing just as awareness raises, but a lot of people don't write multilingual websites, so. Position sticky, logical properties. Logical properties will continue to get bigger. That logical properties sort of goes hand in hand a little bit with writing modes, but I like logical properties even for things like margin inline or padding block or something like that. I like using that. Aspect ratio, come on, if you know about it, just start using it. It's so great. Such a useful property. Content visibility has basically not grown. Look at that. There's actually, the growth of it's gone up a little bit, but the know about it's actually dropped. That's interesting. And hopefully people that didn't know about this have started knowing about it now after doing this survey, and they've got onto the Flexbox, gap property for Flexbox, because it's fantastic. The break rules, it doesn't surprise me because it's about how, as it says here, how things break. Yeah, I'm really not surprised on that one. Container queries, this is, once this lands, it's going to explode. Like the fact that it was this past week that container queries hit their public draft, and so it's like actually part of the draft and everything now, it's already at 54% of people who know about it is crazy. Because usually when things are just landing at that first public draft, nobody knows about it. So the fact that it's already at 55 almost, or 54, 55%, already know about it, it means people are excited for container queries and have been talking about it a lot. Whoa, that's weird. Less and less people are knowing about CSS shapes. I'm wondering if it's how the question was asked, or if it's just because there's more respondents that are responding. That's a weird one that less people or more people are saying they never heard of it. And yeah, it's basically if you do I've done a few videos where I've looked at it. No, not too much, but you have something floating and then it's a circle instead of, you want it to wrap around that, or you have a shoe and you want it to wrap around the shape of the shoe, or whatever it is. You can use CSS shapes for that. I'm really surprised that the knowledge of never heard of it's actually dropping instead of rising. It's interesting. Object fit, that's just going to keep going. If you don't know about object fit, it's like background image, but for actual images or video elements. It's really awesome. Clip path, as you'd expect, it's just growing. Masks as well, just not as fast. Doesn't surprise me too much. Blend modes, yeah, I mean, blend modes aren't super, they can be really useful, but you don't always need them. So not too surprised with that. Filter effects, yep, makes sense. Backdrop filter. I'm surprised actually that backdrop filter didn't have a huge jump here, just because of the whole glass morphism thing that happened. You needed backdrop filter to do that. And that sort of trend exploded, I think, this year. So I would have thought you would have seen a huge jump, but hey, who knows? Color gamut being low doesn't surprise me at all, just because most people aren't too stressed about that. It's specific use cases, especially right now. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Perspective, have used it, dropped that much. So this is a case of the survey getting bigger, I'm guessing, because I don't see why else it would have shifted like this. And it's just a lot of new people coming in, I guess, who have never done 3D CSS stuff. That's kind of weird, but I don't know. Intrinsic sizing. Yeah, I mean, intrinsic sizing is really nice. I don't know if I have a video on that or not, but intrinsic sizing, I probably should do a video on it. Give your min content, max content, and fit content. And it's super useful. And I'm happy that many people know about it. Conic gradients, I'm actually surprised it's that low. I hear about them all the time. There's so many cool things you can do with conic gradients. And I think browser support's finally gotten to a point. It would have been cool if they'd asked in previous years, because last year, the browser support was really bad for a long time, and then all of a sudden got better. And actually, we have useful links here. I didn't even realize that. There we go. We can use conic gradients now. So I'm surprised that it's that low, because they can be super, super useful. The color, yeah, here too. Actually, have used it. That many people have used color? I don't think so. I think they mixed up and didn't realize what it actually was. We had that other question earlier, where the color gamut, and people are saying they haven't used color gamut and don't even know about color gamut. Well, I mean, 17.3 there, but if you don't know about color gamut, like, you're not going to be using color, because this is really about naming the specific color space. And I don't know why would there be so many people who know about, and again, color gamut, they're not the same thing, but it's when you need to define something other than the sRGB, which is the default. I would be really, and even, I thought this was like, yeah, nobody's are you really using color? I don't think you're really using color. It's barely supported. It's cool that it's coming, but I'd be very surprised by that. And here, like, if you're not using color, but then I think people misunderstood the question there, because if you accent color is something that's like easy to use, easy to understand, easy to implement, and you still only have 7% of people doing it, whereas most people I don't even think would realize like the difference between color spaces. Maybe I'm wrong, but and again, the browser support there is non-existent, whereas here it should be pretty good, I think. Wrong one. We want can I use. Yeah, so oh, it's coming in Safari. Yes. Again, it's not this huge big change when you use accent color, but it's a nice little cool thing that helps, and I think and it's super easy to do. So that surprises me a bit. Let's go on to interactions. Scroll snap. Yes, that's going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And that sort of goes with the over scroll behavior. I mean, it can be used with that, I think. But it's also just boundaries, how things are going to act and everything with scrolling, especially, when you over scroll, you don't get it so much on a computer, you get it more on mobile. So I could see this slowly growing, but it's one of those things that I think will never be this like massive thing that people are using all the time. Maybe I'm wrong, but overflow anchor. So again, dealing with scroll behaviors, this one could be useful, but again, all these scrolling things sort of go together. Touch action, I'm surprised a little bit that that's not getting better, but you don't hear a lot about it, so that makes sense. pointer events. So like this can actually be really useful if you have, when you have, for some reason, you need to overlay something over something else. But that means when you can't actually like click on that thing that's behind. Who knows why you need to do this? It comes up rarely, but it can be super useful. So you need to like pointer event none the thing in front so you can actually click on the thing behind. And I'm sure there's other uses for it that I don't think of. Scroll timeline, again, nobody knows about it, but it's coming and it's going to be fantastic. Font variant, so this is dealing with, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And does surprise me is the trend here where it's getting smaller. But again, I must be the growing audience and sort of these more niche things that not everyone's going to be using. So I think that's why, but I guess I should do a video on font variant. Just to try and raise awareness a little bit on it. Same here. I guess typography, it looks like just this general trend looking at these here, that typography, you know, as the audience increases and the survey respondents are increasing, that we're getting this downward trend in a way of not knowing about it or never heard of it. Line clamp's an interesting one, but I don't think you can use it too much, can we? Oh, I knew it's prefixed. You need the, is it not prefixed? Yeah, it's prefixed everywhere. I didn't realize it was available everywhere. So line clamp's like how many lines long. So you're not limiting, you're not doing like a certain line length this way. It's how many lines do you have? And then you can have like your ellipsis or whatever. So say you have a card where you're pulling in dynamic information or dynamic content, and some of the paragraphs are 2 lines and some of them are being 10 lines, and you want all your cards to be the same size. You could say line clamp of 2 lines, and that means even if it's tons of content coming in, it's just going to chop it off automatically. So it could be really useful, actually. Variable fonts. This it's a shame they didn't look last year because I'd be curious. I've been wanting to do content on variable fonts for like 3 years now, probably. But now that they're really here and I've played with them and I've done stuff with them, I really should make some content on them because variable fonts are fantastic. And I mean, they're even in Google Fonts now. They're a bit different, but they're there. Prefers reduced motion is growing. That's good. And more people seem to know about it. So definitely this accessibility section is one I was really looking forward to getting into here. And it's sort of nice to see that it's growing. I really would like to see this growing much faster though. Prefers color scheme. I'm really this is because light and dark mode. That's why this has anybody knowing about it, which I guess makes sense. And I'm sort of surprised with how low this is. Just because of the whole light dark mode thing. Whereas this is a little bit, it's kind of encouraging, I guess, that they're roughly the same stage, just because this is sort of something that people like implementing, whereas this is more about taking into account accessibility stuff, even though the color scheme and, you know, having a light and dark mode is good for accessibility and not just for fun. Prefers reduced data is really small. This is just a nice way to reduce the amount, you know, if somebody's on a situation where they want to reduce the data that they're using. Yeah, I'm surprised that not more people know about that, but I guess it makes sense. Color contrast, that doesn't surprise me. Again, I mentioned that on earlier, but this is going to be one that once it becomes a thing, I think it'll take off. I'm guessing because it just makes our life a lot easier. Basically, you can say like, I have this color and I want to, here's 4 different backgrounds that I could put this text color on. Choose the one that would work the best. And the browser will figure it out for us. It's going to be fantastic. In general, don't use tab index if you don't have to. Have used it. Hopefully they're using it in a good way. And often you're doing a negative one or a 0. You're keeping something in tab order or the negative one to make it so you can't tab onto it, even though normally it would be. Area, that's kind of, a lot of people have been using area, so that's nice that I'm surprised. I was expecting this one to be a lot lower, so I'm happy to see how high the area is there. CSS variables. This, again, this doesn't surprise me. There we go. It's just going to keep growing and taking off. @supports is growing. That makes sense. Containment. So this is going to explode once container queries become a thing, just because they rely on containment a lot. But there's other reasons to use it, dealing with layout shifting and other stuff like that. But I think that container queries is going to be the big thing. And people are going to know about container queries without really knowing about CSS containment as well. But this, when as performance is becoming more and more important, this might actually gain a bit more traction too, I guess. Hey, look, it's me. And yeah, definitely check out Stephanie if you don't already. Will change. Again, this is about performance a little bit on letting the browser know when things will change. There's performance. You can help gain performance with it, but it can also slow things down. So you want to be really careful with will change. You don't use it just because you want to use it. You use it because you found a performance issue that you want to try and fix. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Calc. Yeah, that makes sense. Basically, everybody's using calc these days. Houdini, I'm in that know about it stage. Houdini, as the name implies, is magic, and I have no idea how it works, but it's really cool. It's really, really cool, and I should dive into it. Maybe that could be a project for 2022 for me. Comparison functions, min, max, and clamp. And yeah, I see those next year will probably be growing a lot. I think that's going to sort of follow this. Maybe, I don't know. We had some other trend lines where things were growing a lot, and min, max, and clamp are just amazing. So that's just going to keep growing for sure. Houdini custom properties. Actually, this is the one place where I have played with it. The app property CSS rule is amazing. And once other browsers support it, I will be doing content on it because it opens up some new doors to custom properties that we don't have or we can't do at the moment. Marker, I've talked about this one. It's one of those things that, like, if you know about it, just use it because it's cool. And it lets you do, you know, it's very small, sort of subtle changes. It's like accent color in a way that it's not like, oh my goodness, I have so much more control. Even Marker does make our life quite a bit easier though, for styling the markers, like our list items and other stuff. There's a few other places it can be used. Summary, yeah. So you can, anyway, it's a cool thing that if you know about it, you might as well use it because it comes in handy just to make these little stylistic changes that otherwise aren't possible. Okay, here's another one I was really looking forward to seeing. So we have satisfaction versus usage of things. So preprocessors or post-processors, Sass, Less, post-CSS, things like that. Frameworks, Tailwind, Bootstrap, Foundation, and then all the CSS-in-JS things as well, your CSS module, style components, things like that. And interestingly, the only one that's in adopt is Sass. That really surprises me. So that means a lot of people are using it, and a lot of people are also very satisfied with it. So it's high usage and high satisfaction, so a lot of people there. Whereas interesting, Bootstrap has a lot of people using it, but a low satisfaction. So that doesn't surprise me so much. So just looking at the preprocessors, there's Sass, or pre and post. We have post CSS, which actually has very high satisfaction. That makes sense. Actually, the CSS-in-JS seems to have very high satisfaction, but lower user counts. So they're all, like, some of them have very high. And the interesting with the other way, the frameworks are going, generally speaking, with low satisfaction, even though most of these frameworks are sort of in this, like, not very good group here, which is interesting. Because generally you want to be like in one of these two up here, and down here is not so good because it just means lower satisfaction. I'm really surprised Less and like Stylus are down here. Stylus usage I knew wasn't very high, but I would have thought that people liked it more because the people I know who use Stylus really like it. And like, I don't know why Sass is so much higher satisfaction compared to Less and Stylus. I have no idea. But yeah, so it looks like, I guess one issue here is like you have Sass, you have Less, and you have Stylus. So like most people seem to be using Sass, and post CSS is pretty high too. Whereas then, and there is a lot of overlap between them. So like they're getting a lot of the usage. So the numbers are pretty high on user count. Whereas here in the CSS-in-JS stuff, there are so many different ones that the user base is sort of split across a lot of them. So even though the satisfaction is high, the total users is low just because it's sort of all over the place, right? Even though styled components and CSS modules are the higher on the count, but it's interesting. And just in general, other than Tailwind and a little bit of the pure CSS there, people don't seem to be too in love with frameworks in general. A lot of in the lower satisfaction range there. Rankings of preprocessors, pre-post processors. So post CSS, satisfaction post CSS is up there. And Sass is, oh look, Sass is actually dropping a little bit in its satisfaction over the years though. That's interesting. Stylus, and we have assembler down there at the bottom. I'm actually, for something that's more niche, I'm surprised that the satisfaction is so low. Like most people probably haven't even heard of it. The interest level, ooh, look at that. Post CSS has passed Sass. I still like Sass a lot, but I think why that is, there's stuff post CSS can do that Sass can also do. You can bring in things like nesting and other stuff. And there's Sass features that people don't use. And so people might be making that sort of switch over from one to the other a little bit, even though I still think Sass is worth using personally. I like using Sass and PostCSS together. They can work well together too. Usage Sass is still way up there and it's actually growing, and less is dropped down. PostCSS is growing as well. That makes sense. And awareness. Everybody knows about Sass, even if they're not using it. Less people generally know about, just don't use it. PostCSS, it's growing. The numbers are going up, so cool. And yeah, Stylus is there, and yeah, as I thought, Assembler, not many people know about it. And experience over time would use again. Sass is dropping a little bit. PostCSS is really taking off, and it's interesting because PostCSS has been around for a long time now, so it's interesting to see it's gaining steam pretty quickly at this stage, and it's baked into a lot of stuff now too, which is kind of cool. Positive negative split. So yeah, Sass and PostCSS, as we sort of saw in that other thing, very high. Less Stylus are not doing so great overall, which I'm still a little confused by, but I never really got into. I saw them, I played with them, but I've just got into Sass as the first one, so I had no reason to switch, but I'm curious why people don't like those as much. And if you know why, leave a comment down below. How happy are you with the state? People generally are happy, neutral, or very happy. I'm in the very happy. I think they're very good, what we have right now. CSS frameworks. Satisfaction, Tailwind. Oh, look, Tailwind's actually had a spike in 2022, and people are not as happy with it in 2021 as more people are using it. That's kind of interesting. Pure CSS is 70. So, I mean, in general, like the satisfaction level with these is pretty low, but people seem to just keep going back to them. This is why you need just to learn CSS, guys. Interest, Tailwind. Again, Tailwind had a spike and has dropped back down. That's really interesting to me, that it got up to from 50 to 62 and then back down to 51. So people, I guess, got excited about it. It was the hot new thing. And then now it's sort of leveled back off to where I hear about it so much. I always think more people use it than they actually do. Semantic UI is dropping. Balma is really dropping. Look at that. That's an interest. What about Tachyons has really dropped off as well. And I haven't heard much about that. Foundations dropping off. I find it really interesting seeing how some of them actually just drop off in interest, because I think it shows interest in Bootstrap is at the bottom, but usage of Bootstrap is, look at that, so high. 85% of people have used it, and Tailwind there. So it does show Tailwind has really, it's gone from 6% to 40% of people who responded having used Tailwind. So despite the interest sort of fluctuating a little bit, the usage of it has exploded. I'm wondering when Bootstrap's actually going to start dropping. And again, this is people who have used it, so it'd be a long time, I guess, before that actually drops, even if people aren't currently using it. But we can see Bootstrap, Semantic UIs dropping, Tachyons, things like that doesn't surprise me too much. And awareness, everybody knows about Tailwind now, even if they're not using it. That makes sense. And look at that, like just from one year to the next, the awareness of Tailwind just went crazy there. At that. So yeah, I mean, this doesn't surprise me too much. It's sort of what we were just looking at, negative, positives. So yeah, Bootstrap, people either really like Bootstrap or really don't like it, with more people on the don't like side. Tailwind, definitely a lot more on this side, but it, you know, the negative trends here just blows me away on how high they are. And a few other write-ins there. I just learned about Windy CSS. I hadn't heard of it before. And happy, not too many people there, a lot of neutrals. Yeah, makes sense. CSS-in-JS, which is not my forte, but we'll look at them anyway. There's just, you know, if you go back to 2019, there was 1, 2, 3, 5, and look now, like holy cow, has this part of the world exploded. With vanilla extract, look at this, just out of nowhere having super high satisfaction. Let's go to usage. It's pretty low down at 1% of usage though. So people really, that 1% who use it have really liked it. But basically, most people are on styled components or CSS modules, which that makes sense because that's just those are the big ones. Style JSX is coming up next. I mean, nothing here surprises me too much. And like these other numbers here at the bottom are so low. Awareness, I'm a little bit curious about usage and awareness, just to see if there's any. So the only one I see here is the vanilla extract. I have a feeling we'll see that one taking that next step next year, just because it does have quite high awareness compared to the actual usage. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised seeing that one go up. And yeah, and the fact that the interest level in it is so high, I see that one. I haven't even heard of it before, to be honest, but I have a feeling we'll be hearing more about it with it being that popular. And so yeah, let's go on. Oh, look, somebody picked me. I didn't even realize. Thank you so much. Gift Igwenu. I'm apologizing if I said your name wrong, but thank you so much for nominating me. That's really nice. I appreciate that. Let's keep on going. Look at that, like neutral. I'm surprised. Like they haven't found a good solution, so maybe just don't use them. Hot take there. No, I'm kidding. Other tools. Prettier, yeah, auto prefixer, style int, purge CSS, CSS nano, used on a regular basis. All of that makes a lot of sense. Browser usage. Which browsers do you primarily work in during initial development? Look at Firefox, holy moly. Clearly people are using multiple browsers just because the numbers add up to way more than 100 here. Percent, yeah, so pretty much everyone's using Chrome and Firefox and Safari, I'm guessing, or maybe some are mixing in Edge there instead of maybe Chrome. I'm not sure. So this is you working during initial development. So yeah, I guess, you know, people are bound, you know, they're making sure to use multiple browsers even during initial development, which is a good thing to do, so you don't run into a nasty surprise later on. Library evaluation ranking. Oh yeah, this is the interesting one where they did like head-to-head, like which one is more important, and you sort of had to like head-to-head battles on some, and then you'd pick your winner for each one in like a tournament style bracket. And it looks, so documentation, developers, they pitted all these against each other of which factors do you prioritize when evaluating a new library? Their documentation, their developer experience, user experience, accessibility, etc., etc., etc. And it looks like documentation is the most important, which makes sense because you need to know how to use it, followed by developer and user experience. That I get why we haven't. Can we just? Oh, here's the individual matchups too that we can look at to see like how they faced off against each other. Interestingly, hype and momentum are really low, but well, I don't think anything is going to gain a lot of hype and momentum if it doesn't have good documentation and developer experience. So, but I think this might be higher than it actually is. People will say that the other things are more important, and I guess if once you're in it and you're looking at it, but you're not going to check it out unless, you know, you're not, if there's not a lot of hype and momentum around it, you might not even explore it in the first place. So just throwing that out there. What browsers do you test in? So this, yeah, here's test, which makes sense. Let's go to this one because there's, so here basically you expect a lot of the numbers to be higher, and I'm surprised Safari is so low. It's Windows developers, I guess, that don't have access to Safari. I'd encourage you to buy a cheap, like used MacBook or something. That's easy to say, a cheap MacBook, but you do want to test on Safari because it is a little different from the other ones. And even I found a weird thing in Firefox the other day with SVGs and blend modes that doesn't seem to work in Firefox. So it is important that you do test in everything that you can get your hands on, basically, as much as possible. Testing environments, desktop, smartphone. Again, like, guys, test on your smartphones. Don't just rely on the mobile mode or whatever it is there. Make sure you actually test on different devices. Chances are you have a phone. At least test it on your own phone as well. Not just, you know, load it up, test it on your phone. Not just assuming the browser is going to do the job. So the accessibility stuff isn't desktop with keyboard only. Come on, guys, you can. That's easy. It's not that hard to do. You should be testing your stuff definitely with your keyboard. Screen reader, I get why not everyone's doing that, but if you're, you know, a combination of using some testing tools for accessibility plus potentially running it through a screen reader, not too hard to do. Print support, I get, you know, it depends on the site you're building. If you're doing a recipe site, I think you might want to test that. A lot of other people might not be bothering. Accessibility feature. Which accessibility features do you usually implement? So yeah, everybody's saying that they knew and had used Aria, but then you have only 56% of people saying they use alt texts. So like, that's a little sad. 52% saying semantic markup. Well, even here, like, so people have used ARIA, but only regularly use it 46% of the time. And you might not need a lot of ARIA on your site. And if you don't know what ARIA is, don't stress too much, but it's worth looking into. Focus indicators, like alt text, semantic markup, and focus indicators. To me, this is super, like that's the easiest minimum bar in my opinion, and it should not be hard to implement. Keyboard navigation is super easy to test and play with and make sure that it's all working. So like the skip to content, people 20%, okay. I actually have a video coming out tomorrow, I think, on that one, or if not tomorrow, it came out yesterday, and if not yesterday, it's coming out next week. So I'm glad about that because it's super easy to do. And yeah, this is for me super disappointing. Like a lot of the, like alt text is the easiest thing in the world to implement. And you can do it programmatically. If you have dynamic content, it's still not that hard to do. So it takes a bit of work in that case, but it's not that bad. So kind of disappointing on that end, I won't lie. What do you mainly use CSS for? Web apps, marketing sites. Yeah, I mean, nothing too surprising there. I saw an emails in there, which is scary. First steps with CSS. How did you initially learn it? Self-directed learning is really high. Online courses that are free. That's sort of the same thing, I think. Google, Stack Overflow, and then you found a free online course. Videos and screencasts, on-the-job training, books, high school or higher, so school and higher education, paid courses, mentoring, podcast. I guess you learn CSS through podcasts though when starting out, or maybe you heard about it and then sort of got interested in it. That's always possible. You're doing back-end stuff, doing other stuff, and then you start hearing more about CSS through a podcast. You just decide to learn it. That could be possible. Blogs and magazines. Which ones? CSS tricks, not surprisingly, followed by smashing, followed nothing. Let me just see if there's anything that stands out here. But, oh, CSS in real life, and nice. Happy to see those there. Front End Horse, nice. If you're not following those, definitely give them a follow. Yeah, nice to see those showing up on the list. That's awesome. But yeah, no big surprises on there. Cool. Sites and courses. Which sites? Stack Overflow and MDM. That makes sense. They're really high. People still use. W3 Schools isn't as bad as it used to be, but I'm glad to see that MDM is so much higher. Free Code Camp, Udemy, Westboss, makes sense. Front End Masters, ACAT. Yeah, nothing standing out here. Level Up in there, definitely. Cool. That makes sense to me. Podcasts. Syntax, Shop Talk Show, makes sense. CSS podcast, definitely worth a listen if you haven't listened to it and you're into podcasts. Yeah, nothing too surprising in the list of podcasts. And if you want to follow some front-end related podcasts, here's a nice list that you can choose from and dive into. And guys, seriously, so this is a free-form field, comma, separated names, and there's a lot of people on this list that I don't deserve to be ahead of. So I do appreciate that enough of you wrote in and submitted my name for this. But there's amazing people on this list that definitely should be higher up than me. But thank you all very much. I know it does help, I guess, that my focus is purely on CSS, whereas some of these people, it's not purely on CSS. But yeah, thank you very much for that. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable, I won't lie, but I do appreciate it. Yeah, thank you very much. And just if you need more people to follow, looking through this list is just a list of wonderful people that you should definitely be following. And I don't know why I'm above most of them. Yeah, some really good names in there to follow. So we can't read them all out, and they're all worth a shout out. So definitely you can check that out. Opinions. Is CSS easy to learn? Interestingly, the agree grew, and it's about the same as last year. So that's encouraging to see. Actually, interesting. The agree and the disagree sort of, but it's about the same as last year. I mean, that does make sense. I think the strongly agree is it's easy to get into, but it's one of those things that's hard at the end. CSS is evolving too slowly. This is Agree is shrinking down, which doesn't surprise me, and the disagree is and strongly disagree are growing. So that well, actually it shrunk and then grew, but the disagree as a general is disagreeing, and that makes sense with all the new stuff that's coming to CSS. So I get that. Utility non-semantic classes, centered, large text, etc. should be avoided. You know what it is the neutral shrunk. Went 32, 31, 29, and the two other ends have gotten bigger. Just because, you know, I don't think there's any, well, yeah. That's kind of interesting, actually. But utility classes should be avoided. And yeah, I just find that interesting, especially with utility frameworks like Tailwind taking off. That's kind of interesting. I enjoy writing CSS. Well, that makes me happy. This is what I like to see. The strongly agree is, oh, it shrunk down a lot from there, actually. I don't like seeing that necessarily, but I do like the neutral, and these other ones are shrinking, which is the most important one. As long as you enjoy writing it, and that's in the agree or strongly agree, that makes me very happy. Are there any features that have difficulty because of the difference between browsers? These numbers are actually really low when you consider, I mean, 725 people, so only an 8.4 completion percentage. So in general, not too bad. Grid, I get Internet Explorer, I know. Subgrid, 100% for me. It's not so much what differences. This is just not everyone supports it. Flexbox Gap, I think we're good to use that now. Well, again, it depends. Are you supporting Internet Explorer or not? Which aspect of CSS do you struggle with the most? Ranked by number of tournament rounds won. Browser compatibility, architecture and maintenance, styling form elements, responsive design. That's encouraging that it was not winning. It's sort of in that second round area, layout and positioning, performance, interactions, and scoping and specificity. And that's going to get even easier. So next year, or 2 years from now, maybe that'd be a lot lower. But browser, people who are newer to this whole thing might not realize that this is not that big a deal anymore compared to what it used to be. Really not a big deal anymore. To me, the architecture and maintenance is so much worse than browser compatibility. But that's how people feel. And I'm surprised styling form elements isn't higher up on that, to be honest. Yeah. CSS features missing. So people are excited for container queries, parent selector. So by the end of next year, these two might, container queries, parent selectors, nesting, and scoping, and subgrid, and potentially color functions might all be things that we have. So for things that are missing from CSS, next year promises to be a really good year. There might be some browser compatibility issues with some of it still, but we're going to have them at least. Right? Because parent selector, to me, that's the has. Container queries are, they're trucking. Scoping is coming. Nesting is coming. Browser support is just browser support. It's always going to be something we like to complain about. Subgrid is on the way. So yeah, there's really good. How happy are you with the general state? Happy? Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. How happy are you with the general... Web Technologies was happy, and CSS... Look, more people were neutral than happy. Just compared to the two of them together. But I'm happy that people in general are happy with CSS. This might be also skewed a little bit because it's a survey for people who write CSS, at least on some basis or not. So like, I know there's some people who hate CSS, but they might not have even bothered with the survey. Awards, things that stood out this year. The most adopted feature year over year. I have no idea. Comparison, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's the min, the max, the clamp, that type of thing. Highest satisfaction, awarded to that post CSS, right? That was the one that was like super high, yeah. And highest interest. The most interested in learning once they are aware of it. Was that vanilla one? The CSS-in-JS vanilla something? Oh no, CSS modules. Huh, interesting. And vanilla extract was next. Interesting. And conclusion, of course. Written by Killian. Awesome. If you don't know Killian, it says right there he was the creator of Polypane. But I just want to say the state of CSS right now is a really amazing place, I think, and it's only going to be getting to better and better places next year. There's so many exciting things coming. And as I mentioned, one of those things that I'm really excited about is scroll timeline. So if you'd like to check that out, there is a video right here for your viewing pleasure. And with that, I want to give a really big thank you to Adam, Johnny, Stuart, Randy, and Tim for being my supporters of Awesome over on Patreon, as well as all my other patrons for their monthly support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.